And again, welcome everyone. I'm glad you could come tonight. My name is Lynn Mann, and I'm the co-leader of the Massachusetts Sierra Club Forest Protection Team. And I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your evening to learn more about our campaign to protect the publicly owned watersheds, forests of the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watersheds. We have three excellent speakers today. The first one is Rachel Alexander, and Rachel will kick us off um, with an introduction to the campaign. Rachel is from Cambridge, Massachusetts originally, but she graduated from UCLA in 2023 with a Gender Studies Honors Bachelor's degree. And with her background in art and advocacy and her passion for sustainability and her recent experience living in New Zealand, she recently joined the Forest Protection Team to be an active steward of the local land, and she's been very active with us. Dr. Bill Stubblefield will speak next, and he has a lifelong interest in ecology and evolution. Dr. Stubblefield has an MA in biology from the University of California and a PhD in biology from Harvard University. Over the last few years, he's focused on the potential of natural solutions to the multiple planetary crises we now face, especially the potential of forests to accumulate carbon and preserve biodiversity. Bill plays a key role in our Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watershed public forest protection campaign, bringing abundant knowledge and insights into the intersections of ecological, political, economic, and social values of these forests in the state of Massachusetts. And then John Hurst, who has spent many years working in aerospace contracts, and yet he's always had a passion for the outdoors, trees, and hiking in the forest. So when John retired, he decided to put this interest and his desires into action by joining the Massachusetts Sierra Club Forest Protection Team. And in addition to working on this campaign, he is the chapter outings leader. And so we welcome all three of our speakers. And I just want to mention that before we get started, as we go along, please feel free to put questions in the chat, or you can hold them for the end, and then we'll take questions for the speakers. So Rachel is going to start off. She's going to offer us an introduction, ask some fun questions like you saw in the beginning about the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watersheds, and share background about our campaign. So over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Lynn. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Alexander, and as Lynn mentioned, I'm a volunteer at the Massachusetts Sierra Club Forest Protection Team. Thank you so much for coming to our presentation. We're really excited to share a bit about our current campaign to preserve public forests in the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watersheds. To start off this presentation, we'll cover a brief description of current Massachusetts state agency forestry practices. We'll discuss the unique nature of the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watersheds, and we'll explain why we've chosen to support a campaign to protect these specific public forests. As Lynn mentioned, Dr. Bill Stubblefield will dive deeper into these watersheds, offering a historical overview of their development, outlining their use by the state, and discussing why public lands should be left unlogged. John Hurst, Lynn, and I will end with sharing information on specific actions that you can take to protect your clean drinking water and support the crucial forests on our public land. So to get started, as you saw at the beginning, we'll be asking some fun questions just to get us thinking about the watershed systems that we live in. So circling back to this question, where does your water come from? Is it A, Fresh Pond Reservoir, B, the Charles River, C, local wells, D, Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett reservoirs, or E, your faucet? You can write in the chat or think about it. And we'll reveal the answers. Very exciting. On the next slide. For anyone who said your faucet, you're technically right. However, if you live in the greater Boston area or in a number of other cities and towns in central and western Mass, you may be one of the 3 million people in the state that gets your clean drinking water from the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watershed system. On the screen, you can see a map of the greater Boston area on the left and a map of the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watersheds on the right. Currently, state agencies are allowed to conduct commercial logging operations in public forests and are actually supported by state law in doing so. This is in spite of the growing collection of scientific evidence demonstrating that such logging practices are unnecessary at best and more likely harmful and destructive to our health, our lands, and our environment. These forests protect our clean air and water supply, and without fundamentally changing these laws, our public forests will not be guaranteed permanent protection. We will also drop links to these laws in the chat, and the slides will be available after the presentation for you to peruse. The Massachusetts Sierra Club Forest Protection Team endorses preserving all state-owned forests as wildlands, free from human intervention. And while we advocate for all legislation promoting this goal, this particular campaign we're discussing today focuses on the public forest within the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watersheds. And we've chosen this campaign as a way to make actionable change that protects the ecosystems we as Massachusetts residents really rely on for clean air and water. Furthermore, contrary to current science, as Bill will get into, the state continues to insist that logging forests is good for forest health, biodiversity, and even climate change, which is surprising given their age. So to go on to the next question, how old are the forests in the watershed areas? Are they A, less than 40 years old, B, 40 to 80 years old, C, 80 to 120 years, or D, more than 120 years? You can write in the chat, you can think about it. C, it's A, D. Whoa, these are great. We have such diversity of answers. C, B. I think we've covered all of them. Interesting. Okay, drum roll. If you said C, you are correct, but I did not know that before starting work on this presentation. So if you did not say C, that's also okay. The Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watersheds are approaching what we call mature status, or 80 to 100 years old. And that means they could become old growth forests if allowed to keep growing. Old growth forests support native biodiversity, all the way from microorganisms and fungi to amphibians, plants, and larger animals. They're known to maximize atmospheric carbon sequestration and carbon storage, more so than younger forests, which means they significantly offset emissions compared to younger trees. And the older they are, the more water they can hold. These watershed areas offer a unique opportunity to capitalize on the benefits that they naturally provide for us if we leave them alone. You will now hear from Dr. Bill Stubblefield, who brings his deep knowledge of forest ecology together with his expertise in forestry practices, historical, political, and economic realities to form a comprehensive and nuanced picture of where we are and where we should be headed. We will end with more specific information about the Sierra Club Forest Protection Team's campaign to end logging in the public forests, the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watershed, and how you can support this effort. And then we'll end with a Q&A for more discussion. Over to you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I really appreciate that and everyone being here this evening. Forests are critical components of the Earth's system, but are under attack almost everywhere. Like so many other essential inputs into the human system, forests are being pushed to the breaking point by expansion of the global economy and its inexhaustible need for more. Forests are essential parts of the global hydrological cycle and the planetary ecosystem upon which we all depend for our very survival. Globally, forests now absorb about 17% of the CO2 emissions from fossil energy use, and they could absorb much, much more. Clearly, forest protection is critical to meeting the climate emergency. And as the home to countless species, forests are also critical to stem the tide of biodiversity loss. Next slide, please. Fresh water is an essential resource for terrestrial life in general and people in particular. Either too much or too little, water is a critical issue almost everywhere. It is intimately intertwined with the multiple planetary emergencies we now face. Like forests, fresh water has been exploited to the breaking point, and both forest cover and freshwater availability are recognized as planetary boundaries that define a safe operating space for humanity. Forests and fresh water are mission critical components of the Earth system upon which we depend for our survival. Next. The Great Spring, located near where Government Center is today, is one reason why Boston is located where it is. The Great Spring supplied early residents with clean drinking water, but the city soon outgrew that supply, so they added Jamaica Pond, then Long Pond, now called Lake Cochituate. But that wasn't enough, so they dammed the Sudbury River to create the Sudbury Reservoir. But that still wasn't enough, so they dammed the south branch of the Nashua River to create the Wachusett Reservoir, the biggest reservoir in the world when it was filled in 1908. But even that wasn't enough, so they added the Ware River and Quabbin Reservoir, which was completed in 1938 and finally filled in 1946. Since then, the main changes have been raising the rates and upgrading the distribution infrastructure to minimize waste and leakage. But there has long been talk of capturing still more water even further west, including the Connecticut River itself. There's nothing strange or unusual about this story. The ecological footprints of cities always extend far beyond their city limits. Next. This map shows the area between the Connecticut River on the left and Boston Harbor on the right. The Division of Water Supply Protection, or DWSP, which is part of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR, supplies water to the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, or the MWRA, from three watersheds, the Quabbin, Ware River, and Wachusett, and also maintains the Sudbury Reservoir as a backup system. Commercial logging is a central part of the management of these areas. Indeed, the watershed forests are some of the most intensively logged forests in all of southern New England. Currently, the MWRA fully supplies 32 communities, partially supplies another 17, and serves as emergency backup for 4 others. More than 3.1 million people depend on the MWRA for their water needs. Next. The Quabbin Reservoir on the left was created by damming the Swift River about 65 miles west of Boston. The Ware watershed in the middle feeds water from the Ware River into the system when needed. The Wachusett Reservoir on the right was created by damming the south branch of the Nashua River. The red line in the figure is the Quabbin Aqueduct, an enormous tunnel and pipe that connects the 3 watersheds. When the gate to the Wachusett is closed, water from the Ware River flows into the Quabbin. When the gates to both reservoirs are open, water from the Ware River starts a natural siphon that draws water from the Quabbin Reservoir into the Wachusett Reservoir. Altogether, the greater Boston water supply system is a genuine engineering marvel. The green areas on the map indicate lands managed by DWSP, mostly forests. Most of this land is owned by the people of Massachusetts, and we maintain that these public lands should be preserved as forever wildlands, and that this is how to maximize the benefits they provide for all the people of Massachusetts. Next, please. This map shows excuse me. Prior to the construction of the Quabbin Reservoir, there were 4 towns in the Swift River Valley: Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott. All of these were disincorporated, and all the people were moved out, whether they wanted to leave or not. A painful reenactment of an earlier land grab when the indigenous Nipmuc people were displaced at the time of King Philip's War in the 1680s. Quabbin is a Nipmuc word, roughly translated as land of many waters. Next. This is language taken directly from the enabling legislation for the Division of Water Supply Protection. This agency, the DWSP, is responsible for managing watershed lands. The highlighted words reflect an attempt to straddle both sides of a fundamental debate about the meaning and purpose of conservation dating back to the early in the last century. On one side was the concept of conservation for use, promoted by Gifford Pinchot, the first head of the U.S. Forest Service, and on the other side, the concept of conservation as preservation, championed by John Muir, co-founder and first president of the Sierra Club. Conservation for use focuses on the production of commodities, which can be readily converted to cash in the marketplace, while conservation as preservation argues that natural systems are valuable in their own right and worthy of protection for reasons that go far beyond any pricing mechanism. It is a matter of how we value wildlands, either as resources for extraction or as life sources for regeneration. When it comes to the watersheds, both perspectives are relevant. The best way to conserve water for use is to preserve the surrounding forests for its life-affirming regenerative capacity. Next, please. Forests are great for water. Everyone agrees, even the DWSP. Forests provide many benefits that help maintain water quality. They prevent erosion, increase infiltration into the soil, capture nutrients, and filter out contaminants, provide local cooling in downwind rain, support biodiversity, capture and store carbon, and enhance public health. And they do all these things and more, and they do them all for free. What's not to like? Next. Forests are great for water, but logging isn't. Logging compacts, dries, and cooks the soil and harms the rich community of soil organisms that create and maintain the soil. Logging also increases erosion, removes carbon and nutrients from the forest, increases carbon emissions, and doesn't improve water quality. So why is there so much logging on the watershed land? Next. We all support the protection of high quality drinking water supply, but how can we best care for our forests in order to serve that goal? The DWSP argues that active forest management, that is a euphemism meaning logging, is necessary medicine to achieve a protective forest capable of meeting this goal. On the other hand, the best available scientific evidence shows that leaving forests alone to reach their full ecological potential is a far better option. Next. Logging provides no immediate benefit for water quality, but DWSP embraces the concept of a watershed protection forest as a working hypothesis. That's what they call it in their literature, which supposes that appropriate logging can better protect water over the long run by increasing resistance and resilience to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that lie ahead. Next. Working hypothesis part 1. The first major claim, as described in the 2017 Land Management Plan, is that an optimal watershed protection forest should be a mosaic of patches of different ages based on 4 hypothetical propositions, all of which are plausible to some degree, but lack convincing scientific support. The first 2 propositions are that larger, older trees suffer more wind damage, and that patchiness spreads out snow melt over a longer time period and reduces peak flows of meltwater. And while it is true that larger trees are often more susceptible to wind, because they are less flexible and present a larger area to the wind, and a patchy forest may spread snow melt out over a wider interval of time, but there's virtually no evidence that these are significant threats to water quality or abundance. Moreover, opening areas within a continuous forest exposes more trees to the full force of the wind and increases the risk of flooding. A third claim is that logging to increase the number of young trees speeds recovery and protects the soil. These are also not supported by available evidence. To the contrary, recovery, even from hurricanes, proceeds faster when forests are left alone. Finally, the fourth claim, namely that young trees accumulate carbon and nutrients faster than older trees, has no scientific support. In fact, it is the largest trees that capture carbon at faster rates, and they store more and more the bigger they get. Plausible, perhaps, but all these claims for logging to create a mosaic of patches with trees of various ages and size finds little support in fact. Next. The second part of the working hypothesis. The second major claim is that logging is needed to increase the species diversity of trees in order to maximize resistance to pests and pathogens and resilience to storm damage. Tree diversity is a wonderful thing, And it's true that most pests and pathogens attack only a few tree species, and that some species may be more prone to wind damage than other species. However, our forests are naturally diverse and require no logging to remain that way. Early on, much of the watershed land was covered with single species plantations. Watershed forests also suffered from excessive herbivory by deer and moose, which favored species these herbivores disliked, such as pine and black birch. As a result, many areas in the watershed forest exhibited reduced diversity. Plantations, however, naturally give way to native vegetation, and it is young forest habits that increase deer and moose populations. All of our native trees do very well without logging if forests are left alone long enough to develop fully. Although logging can alter the relative abundance of different species, there is little evidence that this reduces damage from pests, pathogens, or wind sufficiently to overcome the damage logging itself does. Available scientific evidence indicates that it is our oldest forests that are most resilient to foreseeable conditions arising from climate change. But the DWSP foresters argue that we should be open to the possibility of engineering new forests by planting trees from further south or by introducing GMO varieties thought to be better able to survive climate disruption. The fundamental conceit here is that watershed foresters can engineer better forests than those nature provides. But where's the evidence? This slide quotes a 2006 paper by Harvard forest scientists David Foster and David Orwig that directly challenged the claims for improved resilience and resistance made by the proponents of actively managed watershed protection forests. As these authors show, available scientific evidence clearly indicates that logging for resistance and resilience yields neither, and that the various threats it is supposed to address have little adverse effect on ecosystem functioning. Logging for resistance and resilience is a solution in search of a problem. Next. Because of the glowing recognition that forests are of critical importance for addressing climate emergencies, the Healy administration established the Climate Forestry Committee to recommend forest policies to help further our climate goals. And it was before this expert committee that the DWSP had to admit that logging or active forest management is not necessary to maintain an abundant and clean water supply. Instead, passive management, meaning leaving forests alone to develop fully, is a far better option for protecting water supplies. Next. A notable conclusion of the committee is quoted here. Unsurprisingly, disturbing forests in Massachusetts as little as possible and allowing forests to grow and age through passive management is generally the best approach for maximizing carbon. Next. Ecological integrity and soil health, to complete the quotation. Forests are critical lifeboats for biodiversity, supporting a large fraction of terrestrial life. Once the dominant land cover in New England, fully mature and old growth forests are now one of our most endangered ecosystems. as part of the largest area of contiguous forest in southern New England. The watershed forests offer a unique opportunity to address this deficiency if we are wise enough to allow them to develop to their fullest ecological potential. These forests are well situated to support a wildlife corridor, or rather a string of glorious green forever wild stepping stones, stretching all the way from Connecticut to Canada. Next. One of the consequences of the land grab and the development of the MWRA water system is that the watersheds tapped for this project now constitute an accidental wilderness of inestimable value in meeting the planetary emergencies we now face, especially the ever worsening climate disruption from carbon emissions and the accelerating threat of ecological collapse as a result of biodiversity loss. We now have the opportunity to do something of genuine importance and lasting significance by preserving this accidental wilderness for future generations. Next. So that's why we say, POW, protect our watersheds. And we ask you to join us in this critical effort for the benefit of all Massachusetts residents and indeed all the residents, human or otherwise, of planet Earth. Now I'll hand it over to John, who will review some forest actions taken by the Healy administration, our ongoing efforts to gather more information about current logging on the watershed, and finally, what you can do to help protect our watersheds. POW! And over to you, John.
Thank you, Bill. The great part of the presentation. Really appreciate it. Good evening. I'm John Hurst. I'm going to give you some context related to the campaign. And what I mean by that is I'm going to tell you what the state has been doing for the last couple of years, what's been happening with logging, et cetera. And as Bill noted earlier, the Healy administration has taken some actions on climate, forests as a key part of the solution, and forestry practices. This slide is giving you a brief overview of what those actions have been over the past 2 years. So starting in January of 2023, when the Healy administration came in, the governor issued a 6-month moratorium on logging contracts. And that was done to assess the importance of forests in combating climate change and also to evaluate the state's current forestry practices. That moratorium was extended just over a year as the process took, longer than anticipated. In June of that year, the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs announced forests as a climate solutions initiative, and that was to ensure Massachusetts forests are managed to optimize carbon sequestration and mitigate climate harms as part of the state's aggressive climate goals. One of the key elements of the initiative was to convene a group of forest and scientific experts, as Bill mentioned, the Climate Forestry Committee, and they were to make recommendations on climate-oriented forest management guidelines, and that included evaluating the state's forestry practices as they stand. The committee deliberated over multiple meetings in the summer and the fall of 2023. In early January of 2024, the CFC report was published with the climate-based forest guidelines, which at a high level proposed employing active and passive management strategies to keep the forest ecosystems and forest covers, protecting the existing carbon stocks and sequestration capacity, and recommending actions using the latest climate science to advance these objectives along with other goals in the Commonwealth. One of the things that's kind of remarkable is that when you read the beginning of the report, it's pretty candid about where the committee was in consensus and where there was significant differences of opinion, which is kind of revealing. 5 months later, in June of 2024, the Commonwealth responded with their what they were going to do on the CFC report. What they did is they laid out an implementation of those CFC recommendations, including scheduled dates. Next slide, please. Now, here we're going to give you an update on logging in the state watershed forests. One of the things that I just wanted to point out, you see a map. There's been a number of maps of the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett reservoirs. And you'll see in this a bunch of little red plots. And what those indicate are unstarted logging projects, and then other ones where they've been started. But one of the things that you should take away is that there's a lot of planned logging all over in these watershed forests. After the CFC report was issued, DCR and the Department of Field and Game evaluated the logging projects, which were put on pause against the CFC climate-based recommendations. That spring, the Division of Water Supply Protection, or DWSP, reviewed 52 of those such logging projects and decided that 38 were going to proceed to bid, 11 with modifications. 6 would remain on pause pending habitat and salvage review, and 8 were canceled. Then in October of last year, DCR and the Division of Fish and Wildlife issued new forest proposals for public comment based on new climate-based guidelines. So our group, dug in and reviewed all these proposed logging projects. And one of the things that popped out pretty quickly is that the guidelines reference these boilerplate patch cuts as a practice in supporting species age and size diversity and climate resiliency. And there was no customization, as far as we're concerned, to tailor that to specific project sites. The team did submit comments on all the watershed forest proposals later in the fall, and we have not received any feedback from the state on any of the submitted public comments to date. Next slide, please. We have been busy, not only in reviewing stuff, but we've been reviewing the CFC report and the state's implementation plan, and now we're seeking out additional information on the state's progress. As discussed earlier, the EEA issued this detailed implementation plan on the CFC report. We have sent a letter to EEA and asking them for a status report back in February. And since then, the Forest Protection Team, along with Senator Joe Comerford, who is out in our area in the West, as well as Bill Mumma, who was one of the scientists in the Climate Forestry Committee, have been engaged in a dialogue with the EEA to learn the progress that has been made towards specific strategic goals in response to the CFC report. This will help us understand where we're going to focus our advocacy efforts next. And oh, by the way, we do have a meeting tomorrow with the same group of people for this particular purpose. So there's going to be more to follow on that. Also, because some of this information is not readily available, we were advised by the administration to make a public records request, which we've done. We did it earlier in April. And specifically, what we're trying to learn is what climate criteria or standards were used in reviewing and updating the pending timber harvest as well as future harvests. And DCR has responded with some documents to the public record request. We're currently reviewing these and may take some follow-up action or make an additional records request based on what we find. At this point, let me pass this back to Rachel to discuss how you're going to get involved in this campaign. Thank you.
Thanks, John and Bill, for sharing such important political and historical information. So, as you shared, our campaign focuses on raising awareness about the current logging practices in these crucial watershed forests. To protect these areas, we're collecting signatures for a petition for Governor Healy's office asking to end this practice. If you want to find out more about this campaign and sign the petition, you can click on the links on the slide, which we'll drop in the chat. I think Lynn just sent them. You can also scan the QR code instead, and I'll take you to the same place. And if you go to the next slide, we'll tell you more about other upcoming opportunities. In addition to supporting this petition, which we request given the importance of this issue, there are also other opportunities to protect forests in the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watersheds. If you are sponsoring or participating in any live events, please feel free to distribute our campaign brochure. And if any of our team members are able to attend, we'd be happy to participate. You can also look out for exciting Massachusetts outings on the Sierra Club website. In upcoming weeks, we have the Quabbin bird watching and hike on Memorial Day weekend and a Wachusett walk on National Trail Day, June 7th. So come see these beautiful lands for yourself, and it'll make you want to protect them if this presentation didn't push you over the edge. Additionally, if we go to the next slide, to share a bit more on legislative action items, we are also requesting that you contact your legislators directly and advocate for permanent preservation of public forests. The bill that our campaign is advocating for is H.952, an act relative to watershed forest protection. This pretty much covers exactly what we've addressed in this presentation, and if it passes, over 100,000 acres of state-owned land within the Quabbin, Ware, and Wachusett watershed areas would be protected as parks or reserves. Be sure when you're messaging your legislator to use words like preservation, reserves, or wildlands as opposed to conservation, because conservation means that the land cannot be cleared for development, but it can still be cleared, or it can still be logged for other various reasons that Bill mentioned in his part of the presentation. Whereas if you say forest preserves or wildlands, that means these areas, the logging cannot happen unless it's for public safety purposes. Lastly, I'll pass it off to Lynn to share a bit more about other bills protecting our forests.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel, for that. And also to Bill and John. That was great. Those were great presentations. In addition to H.952, which is the main bill that we're supporting, but there are several other bills that we also are supporting to protect forests. And it's not just in these watersheds, but across the state. And these could be included in any communications with your legislators. H.953, an act relative to forest protection, would designate all public property controlled by the Department of Conservation and Recreation as reserves, meaning that they cannot be logged. And then H.1048, an act relative to increase protection of wildlife management areas, would place 30% of land controlled by the Department of Fish and Game in reserves. So if you put all of these things together, all of these bills together, they would permanently protect 462,000 acres of intact ecosystems that are influenced primarily by natural processes in our public forests and parks. This is a level of protection that now exists for only 1% of the state's total land base. So we would urge you, if you are writing to your legislators, to put all four of these, to request them to co-sponsor all four of these bills. I'm sorry, I didn't get to the last one yet, which is the environmental justice bill. So while we work to preserve these large tracts of land for biodiversity, the climate, and the public at large, we also recognize the importance of urban trees that both support urban habitat and provide incalculable benefits to people living in urban areas. People who live in urban areas without adequate tree canopy coverage suffer from extreme heat and related disorders, poor air quality and water quality, flash floods, and even increased crime. So there's a Senate and a House version of this bill, S 553 and H 1023, an act establishing the municipal reforestation program that would provide funds to help cities and towns with low canopy coverage to increase the number and quality of trees in areas where people live and work. And so I'll also drop information. I'll drop these bills and fact sheets for each of these bills into the chat as well. I'll do that in a minute because I can't do that and still keep talking. But now what we want to do is open this up for questions and answers. And we appreciate your interest in this vital topic, and we hope to see you soon. If you have any ideas to further advance the campaign or the bills, let us know. You can email Celeste, our team coordinator, and we will take questions.